Hi, everyone. My name is Valerie Sadon, and I am here on the Go All In by Teddy. Today, I'm going to be talking to you guys, giving you a little mental health break / lesson, so to speak, and I'm going to be giving a talk today on self-compassion. So I'm so excited to see people joining, and I'm so happy to be here. I've had a long hi everyone. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker here in Los Angeles. I have a private practice, and I think that the topic today is going to be really timely. My sense is a lot of people have heard the term self-compassion. It's had a bit of an explosion lately, and it seems to be all over the place, but I also feel like a lot of people have not heard about self-compassion. It's very timely to talk about it right now because self-compassion is something that's used as an antidote for suffering. And this is a moment in time where a lot of us are suffering. So I wanted to be here today to offer something. I know everybody here is in this wellness space because they have goals for their health. And a lot of those goals are physical health, and a lot of those goals might be emotional health. So I want to offer you something that can really be a complement to the goals that you're working on with your coaches in your personal lives. So I wanted to do a little bit of a sort of experiment. So for everybody that's on here right now, I want you guys to follow along with me on a little visualization and think of how you would react to the following scenario, just to kind of really bring this idea home and have everybody have a space to sort of understand why this is something we want to talk about and focus on and really cultivate and get better at. I want you all just to think, I'm going to put like kind of a simple scenario out there. This isn't the most troubling and traumatizing situation, obviously. I just want to kind of give an example. So I want you to think of a really stressful day, okay? This is like one of those days where everything just isn't going your way, okay? So it's been a long week at work, and hi everyone. And, it's just long hours, multiple deadlines, so much is coming at you at once. And so now at the end of that day, it's 9:00, you're finally getting down to your car, and you notice that you forgot your phone. So you go back up and you show your badge, you get in the elevator, you go to your desk, you get your phone, you see it's there. Okay, then you go back down the elevator, go back down into the parking garage, and you go to get in your car and you realize you've left your keys on your desk when you went to get your phone. Okay, that's like something typically that would happen to me. Oh my gosh, okay, so then you go back up and you go to get your keys, and you check, okay, I have my keys, I have my phone, I have everything. You go back down. I want you guys to imagine how you might, what is that inner dialogue in your mind when you notice that you have now forgotten your keys and forgotten your phone, okay? Again, simple situation, something we can all relate to. I'm gonna bet that 99 out of 100 are going to be engaging in some kind of self-criticism. Inner dialogue, good question. Inner dialogue is what we would hear if we put a tape recorder into your brain and we could hear what you were saying to yourself, right? So sort of like, yes, exactly. Like, what would I hear if I could be in your brain and hear what you're saying to yourself just below the surface? You might not even be aware of it in the moment. My sense is that a lot of us would be saying in that moment something very negative and critical. Oh, what's wrong with you? Why can't you do anything right? Why are you such an idiot? Right? Like some pretty harsh stuff. It's going to run the gamut, but I guarantee everyone's going to be engaging in some sort of judgment and criticism, right? Yep, lots of F-bombs. Okay, so I want to talk about how we might be able to change that dialogue in these moments of suffering. And that's a simple example, but I want to really talk about moments of more intense suffering. The reality is that inner dialogue that we engage in that's so judgmental and so critical is very, very painful and very toxic for us. And we're probably not even aware of how much we're engaging in that critical and judgmental dialogue with ourselves. I think for a lot of you who have goals related to your health, I want you to think about the ways in which you're relating to yourself when maybe you're not reaching those goals, when you have not followed through on a commitment that you made to yourself, when things don't go the way that you want them to, right? So it could be anything from a simple mistake to real intense suffering. I want you to think about that dialogue, and I'm going to talk to you today about why that dialogue is so unhealthy and toxic, why it actually does the very opposite of what you're intending it to do, and I want to teach you how to cultivate something called self-compassion that's going to actually not only feel better in your body and in your mind, but actually get you closer and make it more likely that you're going to achieve the goals that you have for yourself. So this is sort of a win-win situation. So there's been a lot of research about self-compassion. I did not invent the concept of self-compassion. I want to give credit to the person who did and encourage you guys to go to her website and read about her. She has an awesome test on her website where you can see how self-compassionate you are. And I encourage you guys to all go there. It's selfcompassion.org. That's the website. Kristen Neff is the person who's done so much work in this field. And most of what I'm talking about today is like based on all of the research and the work that she does. Okay, so here's what self-compassion is, and it's pretty simple. It's the practice of treating yourself with the same kindness, care, understanding, and compassion that you would a good friend who's suffering. Okay? Simple, right? It's taking that kindness that all of us have, that we regularly show to our close friends, to our partners, to our children when they're suffering, but that we constantly withhold from ourselves and instead engage in criticism and judgment when we're suffering. So it's not just self-talk. It's actually an entire way of learning how to relate to yourself when you're suffering that in the end makes the suffering so much easier. Self-compassion has so many benefits. It's linked to lower levels of anxiety and depression. It's linked to greater happiness and well-being. It's linked to higher levels of motivation and life satisfaction and better physical health. And the list goes on and on and on, right? Higher levels of resilience. So resilience is the quality that allows us to cope with difficult times. It's something all of us need more of right now, right? We're building resilience, right? This sort of inner strength that allows us to cope with the world, which is so challenging and stressful and painful and full of suffering right now. That's not going to change. So if you're like me and like most people, there's sort of like a very visceral reaction to hearing about self-compassion for the first time or the second time or the third time, because it goes against everything that we were taught by, at least in my generation and generations before me, that we were taught by our parents, by our society, by our teachers, by our coaches about how to deal with times that we're suffering, times that we make mistakes, times that we're not reaching our potential, times that we're not reaching our goals, which is to do what? Think about how you were raised to deal with that. What have you picked up in society? It's push yourself more, be hard on yourself, right? Criticize yourself, point out your mistakes to make sure that you can learn and grow from them and do better next time. Okay, so that's the way I grew up. That's the way most people have grown up. But if you're like me, you've started to realize that that has a very short-term effect, but the long-term effect of that is actually quite negative and defeats the purpose of being critical, and right? Yeah. So when you're critical and you're judgmental, the goal is, if I do that to myself, we're not doing that because we want to hurt ourselves. We're doing that because we believe in the moment that that's what we need in order to change and grow and reach our potential. Unfortunately, and you know, I want everyone to kind of think about this, the opposite ends up happening. So when you engage in a lot of criticism and self-judgment, your brain, and I'm going to get into a little bit of brain stuff here because I like really explaining the effects in the brain of what we engage in everyday life. Why is this positive? Why is this negative, right? I want to really, everything I do is about being backed by research. So I don't want to just pull something out. I want you guys to understand there's a physiological response to the things we say and we don't even realize it. So when you're engaging in negative self-talk and criticism, your brain is perceiving that as a threat. So once I learned that, something kind of was like woke up in me. I was like, oh my gosh. So your brain is perceiving that as a threat. And when your brain perceives a threat, it goes into a state of fight, flight, freeze, as many of you might know. And so it activates your stress response. When your stress response is activated, you get a bunch of stress hormones, right? And you might move really quickly to do something. So that's sort of the short-term effectiveness of criticism and judgment. Like you're activated because your stress response is up, but it's short-term. And after that short-term jump in sort of motivation to avoid a threat, you're going to spiral down into a place of feeling really bad about yourself, shame, guilt, right? And what do those emotions do? They cause us to shut down. They cause us to turn against ourselves. They cause us to withdraw. They cause us to isolate. They cause us to be depressed. They cause us to be anxious. They cause us to hurt the people around us. They cause us to act in ways that are inconsistent with our goals that we have for ourselves, that are healthy. So criticism and self-judgment, my long-winded point is, they end up achieving the opposite of what you're trying to do when you do that to yourself. So then comes self-compassion, which is the opposite, right? The act of being kind to yourself, offering that kindness that you would a good friend or your child when they're suffering. And those self-compassion creates the opposite, right? So self-compassion causes us to start to act in ways that are more consistent with getting us closer to what we want. So it's sort of a leap, I think, for a lot of people, and it takes time to practice this. At first, it seems awkward, it seems weird, it's uncomfortable, it's supposed to be that way. So that it's like it takes a minute to grow on you. So I'm going to talk about the 3 elements of self-compassion. The first is self-kindness. That's what I've been talking about. So a sense of care and understanding for yourself. This is the part of self-compassion where you take a very active stance to comfort yourself, offer yourself comfort. This is the awkward part. I promise as you practice it, it gets so much better and it gets easier. But don't worry, in the beginning, like offering yourself a hug, that's weird to many of us because nobody taught us to do that. And it seems a little bit strange. So what? A lot of things that are new and helpful are going to be strange. So my encouragement to you is to go for it. I'm going to give you some exercises and kind of walk you guys through some ways to start cultivating self-compassion. So it's that comforting stance. The second is something called common humanity. This is really interesting. So the recognition that suffering is a part of the human experience, that this is how things are supposed to be. One thing that causes suffering to be so painful is the feeling that you're alone and that you're the only one in the world experiencing this pain. Those of us who can think of a time that you've suffered, right? It's really common that you say, why is this happening to me? So that's very isolating. It makes you very alone in your suffering, and it gives your brain the perspective that you are the only one experiencing this. When you practice self-compassion, the really important part is to say, everybody suffers, right? It's not to minimize your suffering. It's actually to make you more aware of the fact that you're feeling something is a part of the experience of being a human being, and it's supposed to be that way because it is. The third part of self-compassion is mindfulness. And this is, I'm not going to do a talk on mindfulness today, although I'm more than happy to add a talk on mindfulness, but a sense of really, in order to be able to be with your suffering, you have to first notice it and be mindful of it. And a lot of times we're not even aware of the suffering we're experiencing. So we can't give anything compassion that we're not aware of. So it's the acknowledgement. So those are the three pieces: self-kindness, common humanity, suffering as a part of being a human being. We're all in this together. We all experience that. That's comforting to people in the moment. And then the sense of mindfulness, being able to recognize it in the moment. Okay. So that's sort of the three elements. I want to talk a little bit about why, let me actually give you a little lesson on what a self-compassion break is. All of these exercises that I'm doing today are on Kristen Neff's website. So again, that's self-compassion.org. And you can find some resources on my website as well. At the end, I'll go through all of that. It's valeriesadon.com, VALERIESADON.com. So I'll make sure that all of the links and everything is up there after the talk. So okay, so I want everyone, this is a self-compassion break. This is something anybody can do at any time. You can practice it right now with me. I want you to bring to mind a situation, an interaction with someone, let's make it relational, that makes you feel badly, okay? Only moderately badly, just so you can feel the stress arising in your body. And we don't want you to get overwhelmed by it right now. This is just dipping our toes into it. And I want you to visualize the situation. So feel free to close your eyes right now if you can. And visualize it until you notice your body getting a little bit uncomfortable. Okay? So once you've noticed yourself getting activated by this unpleasant situation, you're going to say to yourself, this is a moment of suffering. Okay? That's the mindfulness piece. We acknowledge the suffering. Then we say suffering is a part of life. That's the common humanity piece I talked about, right? Suffering is a part of life. Then we, third, offering the compassion, you put your hand over your heart. Why do I ask you to do that? When you put your hand over your heart and you put a little bit of pressure on your heart, and this is something you can do at any point, your brain is, the same part of your brain that gets activated when you get a hug from someone is getting activated from this. So your brain is getting the message that you're receiving comfort right now when you do this. And you can do that at any time, right? Anytime you're noticing suffering, you don't have to walk through this whole thing. You could simply do this and you might start to notice a shift in how you feel. So now you're going to put your hand over your heart. You're going to feel the warmth of your hand and the gentle pressure. And then you're going to say to yourself, may I be kind to myself. May I accept myself as I am. Simple, right? Just those two things. And then for the last two phrases, you're going to speak something that you're needing more of in your particular situation. It might be, may I, yes, give to your kids, yes. This is all stuff that is relatable in terms of being right. Like you can, this relates to any aspect of your life, but it's so beneficial for children. And speaking of children, I'll get back to children. So for the last phrase, you're going to say, may I be safe. May I be happy and free myself from suffering. May I find peace in my heart. May I be strong. So think of what you're needing more of in this situation, and you say, may I. It's such a nice way. It sort of comes more from Buddhist teachings that we use a lot in psychotherapy today. They have tremendous benefits, not for a religious purpose so much as for psychological, spiritual benefits. So may I accept the circumstances of my life. So you choose two things and you say that, and that's it. That's your self-compassion break. So this is a moment of suffering. Suffering is a part of life. May I be kind to myself. May I accept myself as I am. And then may I have something that you're needing more of. And that's the simplest way to practice and begin your practice of cultivating self-compassion. So I want to address for a moment some of the resistance to self-compassion that you might notice yourself already thinking or feeling, or that you might in the future notice. And I want to kind of debunk some of the myths that we have about self-compassion. So the number one reason that people are hesitant to self-compassion is that they fear that if they start cultivating this, they're going to be self-indulgent and lazy. Okay, that might be something you've already thought of as you're listening to me speak. So self-indulgent, again, it makes sense if you think about it, right? It's sort of the sense of like, well, if I accept myself as I am, I'm never going to change. I'm never going to grow. So accepting yourself as you are is actually one of the prerequisites to change, okay? So the way that change works is we are much more likely to change and grow if we first start from a place of acceptance than if we start from a place of resistance. So self-criticism and judgment is resistance. Resistance actually makes it less likely that you're going to change, right? Sort of that, I always give that analogy of Chinese finger cups, right? So you put your finger inside of them, the more you pull to get out, the tighter they get. If you put your fingers together and go into it, it loosens up and then you can get out, okay? So that's the idea. That's sort of how I work with all of my clients around change is, yes, we're here to change. We're here to grow. We're here to learn. We're here to do better. First, in order to do that, we have to start with acceptance and compassion. So it's the opposite, right? So when you're self-compassionate, you're more likely to engage in healthier behaviors. You're more likely, right, like exercising and eating well and drinking less and taking care of your body. So it is the opposite, right? All of the research has shown that. Self-compassion will make me weak and vulnerable. That's another really common myth. And fear. It's the opposite. Again, self-compassion is a reliable source of inner strength. And it takes a lot of courage, actually, to acknowledge that you're suffering, to acknowledge that you're needing kindness and comfort, right? And it builds a sense of resilience and inner strength to better be able to face really difficult things like a global pandemic. Like having your children at home for 10 months doing homeschooling, right? So it's the opposite. It's not like putting your hands up and sort of like, okay, forget it. Life is just too hard. It's not about that. It's acknowledging that life is hard, acknowledging that in order to better cope, you would really benefit from some comfort and kindness. And then from there, right, we move forward. We don't just stay in a place of acknowledging. Self-compassion is really, I'm reading from like the myths because I think it's really interesting to look at this and challenge it. Self-compassion is really a form of making excuses for bad behavior. I hear that a lot from people when I try to teach them about acceptance. If I accept myself, I'm just making excuses for my bad behavior. Self-compassion actually provides us a safety net, right? To admit the mistakes that we've made. So again, it's the opposite. I'm not making any excuses. Self-compassion isn't about offering any excuses or explanations at all. It's simply allowing yourself to admit, wow, that was really hard. I didn't act in the way that I really wanted to. I'm suffering because of that, right? It's not about blaming other people. It's actually about owning your own mistakes and taking personal responsibility. What happens when we take personal responsibility? We're less likely to engage in bad behavior. We're less likely to act in ways to hurt ourselves and hurt other people. We're more likely to sort of be able to reflect. We're more likely to apologize and own it and think about how we want to act that way. The last sort of myth or fear about practicing self-compassion or anything that really is in the realm of self-acceptance is people really believe that self-criticism is an effective motivator. I think I've spent some time talking about that, but I do want to just really drive home that self-criticism is, for those that didn't hear the first time, self-criticism activates the fight-flight response in your brain, the threat response, the stress response. And when we are experiencing chronic stress, like most people who engage in lots of self-criticism and self-judgment are engaging in a state of chronic stress, motivation goes way down. We're not motivated when we're in a place of chronic stress. We actually are more likely to either shut down, freeze, or flee a situation. So self-criticism, sorry for those of you who are holding on to self-criticism as your motivator, it's just not effective. And again, for those of you that do it, like you know that already, right? We all know that it's not a motivator. But I think a lot of us just don't have anything else to turn to. We don't know what else to do. That's all we've been taught. So I'm offering the idea of self-compassion today as a way of considering replacing that self-criticism and replacing that judgment with something different, something that's going to make you actually not only feel better, but be able to do better in your life. So that's my self-compassion spiel. And again, I'm more than happy to answer any questions on my personal page after. I think they'll go ahead and tag me, but it's Valerie Sadon, LCSW, Valerie Sadon, LCSW. And I'll put like my email up. So yeah, it was really nice to be here, and thank you guys so much. I'll see you next time.